there! Today is Sunday, June 11th, and this is our Creative Week. And featuring Duncan's Todd's home alarm. Todd just got home from the grocery store. So, how has your week been? Mine has been busy. I got a few things done this week. I definitely made time for creativity. Of course, that is kind of my job these days, but still, it can be tough to really carve out that time and really feel like you've gotten headway made. So just so you know, I get it. Even though this is in essence my job, my full time, it's still being home all the time can be very distracting. Not having someone standing over me or whom I'm obligated to check in with and report to can make it tough to kind of get up and going. And, this week I was kind of coming off of some not great mental health state stuff. But at the same time, I took some steps towards that. So one big thing I did was I found a new therapist. Maybe. I mean, I haven't met them yet. But I have an appointment in 2 weeks, and that feels like a good first step. Um, it's been a year and a half since I was in therapy last, and the reason why that stopped was because of a whole kerfuffle with insurance and doctor's offices and inconsistencies, and it was just a big old mess. I may have talked about it at some point in last year's weekly updates. I'm not really sure which one it would have been, though, because it was several months of me trying to sort it out, and then I finally just said, this is also making it worse for me, so we're going to stop. And then I think it was even longer than that before I was like really wanting to talk about it, but who knows? So it could have been anywhere in last year's feed. Anyway, so yeah, that's a plus. I know I need to get back into therapy. I know I need to be getting help with dealing with some past stuff so that I can better move forward. And speaking of moving forward, let's see what else I did this week. I'm going to click over to another screen so you guys can see what was happening on the digital drawing front. So one of the things I drew was this adorable red panda. Now he's not colored yet. He still has some work to be done on him, but that's perfectly fine because, it's a work in progress, and, but a work in progress is still progress. I'm trying to get my, just trying not to have to move the monitor, but yeah, I need to actually see what I'm doing here. Okay, so he was one, and then I was started working on another idea. We're actually going to zoom past that middle part, called punk sickles. So that's what these guys are here. And these are just little things, excuse me, that occur to my brain that I think are funny, and I want to make like visual representations of those little funny things. While I was working on the punk sickles, I was thinking of like the otter pops and stuff and the ice pops, and I didn't have anything that I wanted to do with the otter pop specifically, but somehow I got onto zombie pop. And so that's what this little drawing is here. I don't know what I'm going to use this for. Who knows? We never know where these things are going to go for us, but they go somewhere. Another thing, this was off Friday's stream, and but on Wednesday's stream, I did another little punny fun thing called a Poultrygeist. Now, I will allow that there is a movie out by that same name. It is a very strange horror movie, very campy, that I seem to recall we found out about right around Thanksgiving, and so we had it playing in the background as I was like making Thanksgiving dinner one year back before we bought this house. So, yeah, strange things, but it is what it is. But yeah, so that's what's happening on the digital art side. Knitting update. My current fiber art project is this shawl. Oh, I forgot to click back over to our full screen view. Hey, here we are. Welcome back. Me, and so it is getting pretty long. I am about 2/3 of the way through section 6 of 9. And this current section I'm on, now that I'm like two repeats in, you can kind of see it pretty well, actually. This is called a smocking stitch. And let's see if I can. Yes, I'm doing the YouTuber thing where you put your hand behind the item. That's more for contrast. Yeah, so it's a really neat stitch. It is probably the hardest one, or the most. They're not hard. None of this is hard. That's the thing. We think of lace as being like big and complicated and difficult. Um, but with the right tools, I have markers every, let's see, I think it's like 15 stitches on this one. If you use the right tools or even improvise some sort of tool, because I mean, I have markers, but I could have used little bits of thread. I could have used anything that kind of helped me remember that, okay, the stitch repeat is this set of stitches, and it helps you catch your mistakes so that you actually it's actually a little bit easier and more confidence building, I think. But yeah, so it's not difficult, but the I on the previous 5 sections, I've been able to usually like memorize or get the pattern or the rhythm of that pattern repeat for that line in my head, and you know able to repeat it over and over across the rows. This was the first one that I had to start using a post-it note or something to mark which line I was on because I couldn't remember it, so I had to keep referring back to it. Not to say that I memorized the lace pattern, just that I could look at the first repeat, do it, and then by the second one, I'd created like the rhythm in my head so that I could just kind of keep going on. It's like singing the chorus of a song, it just repeats. Um, yeah, so that has been a little bit of a challenge with this one. But hey, if it was boring, then I probably wouldn't be enjoying this project so much. So so yeah, that's the update on that. And then I actually did some sewing this week, and not sculpture sewing, but actual for me sewing. I made this little pair of shorts. And you say, but wait, Jen, aren't there still pins in it? Yes. Because technically they are made, but there's still adjustments to be done. With any pattern that you get, and this is something that I guess I never really expected to have to do when I was young and first sewing from patterns. With every pattern you get, it's written to a set of standards, and those standards are not necessarily your body measurements. If you've ever had the experience of going and getting fitted for, say, a bridesmaid's dress, or even probably like a custom suit coat or blazer or something like that, they take your largest measurement, and then they order that blank, that base, in your largest measurement because it's easier to take in than let out, and then they tailor the rest of it to fit you correctly. And I think I expected, and I don't know if this is universal or not, but even like patterns that I made that supposedly, I use my measurements on, or I fit my measurements fit into the pattern details. It still didn't fit quite right. There was also always a little something that was like, but you just kind of roll with it, right? Or you think, oh, I must not have hit the seam allowance right, or I must not have done that right. Well, the truth is that it's not meant to fit you as written unless you are incredibly fortunate to be like that standard body shape and type. And that's pretty hard to hit, frankly. And then, so yeah, that's a thing. But this was actually a vintage pattern. It was a vintage 1930s tap pant. And I can actually show you the pattern, and it's kind of cute. This is the pattern. And you're like, "Dan, what are you smoking?" Nothing. I don't know the name of this system. I got it from Mrs. Depew, Depew, Vintage Fashion. And this is apparently a French system that she's translated into English. Now, I have experience with another system that's like this called the Lutterloh system, that comes out of Germany. And then there is an English system that's very similar called the Haslam pattern drafting system. And basically, they all work by taking small versions of the patterns, which is incredibly space saving and economical as far as like pattern books go or anything like that. And then they have their own kind of sets of rulers. Um, it is in metric, but it will tell you like, so these were a pattern for the bottom half of the body. So I used my hip measurement. And you take their appropriate ruler, and it's sort of centimeters, but not quite. It's its own scale. And you follow the lines and the numbers that arc off of each point in the pattern. And you find that on the correct line or side of this ruler, and that's how you plot your points, and then you can draw in the lines to create the pattern. Now, again, this is even a vintage pattern, so it's based on, maybe even a more restrictive body type. And plus, when you're going, when you have a pattern like this, ideally, the instructions say, for instance, that you can take the same pattern and make it for a doll, a child, or an adult. And an adult up to and these rulers go up to a size or 60-inch bust or hip measurement. So the like I am just below that, and I'm like a 2x, 3x, depending on the item in stores right now. So I would say it probably goes up to 3x, maybe 4x, depending on your particular measurements. Again, it's all custom. But even when you're going in, you're using a system where it's supposed to be, expandable to whatever size. And this is really great for if you are sewing for multiple people. So a system like this does allow for that. You can make each pattern piece for each size that you need. And, I used to use wrapping paper. You can use butcher paper. You can use sheets of like the drawing paper or freezer paper is what I meant to say, but like the kids' drawing roll, you can use the tissue paper that they use at doctor's offices. You can order rolls of that online, or find it sometimes in sewing departments, something similar to make your patterns on so that you have the right pattern that you need at that time for whomever you're sewing for, yourself, a family member, or whatever. So something like this does work, but it's based on, expanding on a base size. And my body is not a base size. So I was really proud of myself. And this is kind of where not only, sewing, making anything is creative because you are literally creating something from, you're creating clothing from a piece of fabric. Okay. You are creating something that did not exist before. You are transmuting alchemy, folks. You're making something into one thing into something else. Okay. But when it comes to pattern fitting and stuff, I felt a little more challenged, and I appreciated the fact that I've been watching so many YouTube's videos on pattern drafting, pattern fitting, customizing stuff, because it has sunk in. Because I thought, okay, well, first of all, when I drafted the pattern, I'm like, that looks really long. I am 5'3". I'm an average height, but my proportions are not necessarily average. And the way that my fat distribution is along my body makes certain things different. But I'm like, those look really long. So I measured where I thought about the hip would be, the outside edge of the pattern, because it's two sheets, and then two pieces that you attach at the groin and then at the front and back seam for the body. But it's two flat pieces of fabric essentially. So it's like, okay, I think this is probably about the hip measurement, or the hip length, from the waist down to the hem. And I looked at that and I'm like, oh, that's going to be halfway down my calves because I am short. compared to this pattern draft. And I'm like, I didn't want them that short. I wanted them above the knee, ideally. So, I figured out about what that measurement was. And I'm like, okay, I need to decrease it by that. But I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I have changed other things in this pattern now. Because you can, I'm like, okay, I adjusted for that. And you do this just by, folding. You can fold the patterns. You can cut and splice. I did it by folding and then just kind of, eyeballing. And then I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Now I need to adjust, make sure that I still have enough total length to go from like waistband to waistband, front to back. What's called sometimes the saddle measurement or the U measurement, because it kind of looks like that. And I didn't. I had shortened that too much. So I'm like, okay, let me add a little bit back into the length so we can easily get that back to where it needed to be. And remember, you got to take into account for seam allowances. You got to take into account ease, because maybe you don't want it snack up to your body or to, your joints or something, the way where your body bends and folds and everything. It's like, okay, so you got to add a little bit more for ease depending on how you want it to fit. I didn't want this to be skin tight, so there we go. Um, so an extra centimeter or two does not go amiss. So once I got that straightened out, I'm like, okay, what else could I be missing? And I realized, oh, because I had to create a waistband, because that's not included in this, but creating a waistband is fairly simple if it's just a simple waistband. So I'm like, all right, let me check the length on that. So I measured out what the length was on the pattern, doubled it since it's front and back, or side and side, I guess, technically. And then checked it per my own waist measurement. And I'm like, oh no, no. And because it's shorts and I didn't want them like super tight, these are not meant to be bike shorts. I measured the widest point of my thigh as well and made sure that I increased the pattern to account for that. And I was really doggone proud when I sewed up that test one and it fit perfectly. Yes, it was still a little bit long, but hemming is a lot easier. Like the pins that are in there are me creating a cuff to get it to like a comfortable look, length for me. And these are just pajama pants or shorts. It's not anything, you know, complex. But I was really proud of myself, and I think that that's a great way of taking something relatively simple in essence. You can follow. Now, these are not really meant for beginner sewers, because you kind of need to know how things are supposed to go together, because it doesn't really come with pattern instructions. So you need to be able to figure that out. But intermediate or higher intermediate is what the patterns say there for. But again, you can learn that. That's absolutely learnable. And so I just thought it was a really cool experience. It took an evening, a couple hours to put those together after I'd gotten the pattern drafted. It's, a few seams, and then I added a drawstring. I'll probably change that out to elastic just for ease and just ease of wearing, so I don't have to worry about tying and it coming untied when I'm asleep. But I slept in them that night. Yeah, I mean, I made them. I went to bed sleeping in the new sleep shorts, and they were perfectly comfortable. And I had no problem when I woke up in the morning. They, they hadn't come apart, nothing like that. So I felt pretty accomplished. The last thing I want to mention is engaging with other people's creativity. I've said this before, counts as creativity, especially if it's something like reading a book or listening to a book. And especially, even more so, if it makes you think. Um, for this week's book club that's coming up, or well, tomorrow for me, our book is The Accidental Book Club by Jennifer Scott. And yeah, I actually read a physical copy of it. I actually had to get this through Thrift Books because I realized when I was in Arizona, I got my dates mixed up. I was like, oh my gosh, the book club is going to be the Monday after I get back, and I haven't even started the book. Let me download it. Couldn't download it. It was not available as an ebook, not available as an audiobook, nowhere. And I'm like, oh. So I ended up ordering it from Thrift Books so it would be here when I got back. And then I realized, of course, I was like, oh, wait, no, book club is the second Monday. What was I thinking of? But anyway, so it gave me more time to read it, but it was good. It was actually a really good book. And it did make me think, because it dealt with like family issues and not like family issues, but it's about a mother, a daughter, and a granddaughter, and um, well, I guess I should say a grandmother, mother, and anyway, the main character um has lost her husband, and or had lost her husband. He passed away from cancer, and she had sort of accidentally started a book club. Or well, one of her best friend and next door neighbor encouraged her to start a book club, um, to have something to do. And so we learn about the women in the book club, but we also learn that the main character, Jean, her daughter is going through some stuff, and the granddaughter is going through some stuff as well because of it. And I was really wondering about this because I was like, is this going to get better? Because I'm halfway through the book and the characters, they're all in one place, but they're hardly talking to each other. They're not making any headway. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these people, they need so much help, kind of thing. It's like, why can't they break through this barrier? But I mean, not exactly a spoiler, they do, in surprising ways at times. And because, of course, it's a book club, it's about a book club. There's also some interesting juxtapositions of like how they talk about a particular book and how that book kind of plays into the rest of the story. So it's a really good book. I really enjoyed it. By contrast, I have a book club on Tuesday as well. This is the week where I have book clubs back to back. And that book, I have it as an audiobook. I've made it maybe a third of the way through. And I may try and force myself through some more of it tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to get through the whole thing, but part of me is just like, you know what? I keep getting angry every time I listen to this book. And part of it could be that, well, I know the majority of it is that the author, it's a memoir, but it's a memoir that's kind of veering into self-help. And I'm like, I don't really like self-help books. At least not the ones that are preachy. And this one is feeling very preachy to me. And I don't even agree. And it's not even like that I can agree with what she's saying all the time, because she makes some very strange, to me, um, correlations, causations, analogies, etc. And I'm like, huh? But she kind of hit on some hot button issues for me. She opened with what was meant to be an analogy of relating her life to her life, her bowing to societal wills as being as caged as an animal in the zoo. And she referenced the cheetah runs that some zoos do, where they do it for the audience, and they give the cheetah gets an opportunity to run hell for leather after a lure on a course. And she thought that was awful. And I can agree. Yes, it'd be fabulous if the cheetahs were able to live in the wild safely. But a lot of times why they're in zoos is because their numbers are dwindling or they've been harmed. This one happened to have been born in the zoo as part of their breeding program. And breeding programs we're not talking like puppy mill breeding. We're talking about very careful breeding attempts to increase the population so that one day maybe they can be let back in the wild. There's a reputable zoos do such a good job and do so much work to provide enrichment, and that's what that lure coursing is. Yes, it's entertainment for the people who are at the zoo, but that's how the zoos support their conservation and stewardship of these animals. And for her to boil that down into analogy as she's caged, she misses the wild, and that was me, and da 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 da, and she keeps going back to it. I'm like, I get what you're saying, but I don't like that comparison, and it's not working for me. Then she went after, and I'm not going to tell you the book's name or the author, because I I don't want to like I don't like bad mouthing, the work of other people. It's just, this is not a book that I would have probably picked up, and it's not one that I'm enjoying. So I don't. And I think it's just fundamental differences with her way of thinking and my way of thinking and our different lived experiences, and that's fine. But it was just kind of a 1, 2, 3 of how she got off on the wrong foot with me. You know, you can meet someone and they can just get off on that wrong foot. Well, this is kind of what's going on. So the second thing that just got my back up a little bit, and I know this is ridiculous, but is showers. The little girl came to her and she's like, Mom, you know, it's like showers are magical. I have these, you know, wild, wonderful thoughts. And she says that she tells the girl, it's like, yeah, that's called think, you know, it's not magic. That's called thinking. It's because, you know, you do that because that's the one time you're not plugged into one of your devices. You know, normal people who, you know, or it's like, you know, we used to do that all the time and stuff. And I'm like, don't come for my shower inspiration, lady. Like, I have written 4 books and done a lot of things. I think a lot. And showers still help me puzzle out problems. Sometimes naps do it for other people. Sometimes I was talking to a friend of mine just the other day, and they were saying that lawn mowing does it for them. It's anything that gets our mind out. You know, it's like a low effort task mentally, and it allows our brains to work on an issue or come up with something. That's not a bad thing, folks. Don't come for the shower inspiration. I'm like, but that was if that had been the only thing, it probably wouldn't have been, you know, I probably would not have had no problems. But then she came for the actually her daughter, I think the same daughter, found out in school about the polar bears' habitats, you know, going being lost, the ice floes melting, the glaciers melting, and how it's impacting them. And the daughter got really concerned, the way children do. And aside, I think this is why zoos are geared towards children still these days because it's through the children that the parents may start to care or may remember what it was like to feel that kind of connection to a type of animal or something. Um, Not the only reason, but I think I suspect that that's a big reason because the children care. The children have this way of feeling this deep empathy and stuff. And so if they can get their parents on board, then all power to them. So the daughter got really concerned about the polar bears. She wanted to save the polar bears. And so the mom is like, and I understand, I'm not a parent, but I understand that yes, somebody's hyperfixation, somebody's like focus can get wearying when you've got all this other stuff going along around. Um, but there's different ways to handle it. And I do not she faked an email from the head of polar bear safety or something. I don't know. She made something up saying, guess what? The polar bears' habitats are no longer shrinking. They're perfectly fine because she wanted the kid to shut up about the polar bears. And that pissed me off. First of all, I mean, I care about the polar bears too. Ignore the fact that it doesn't have a head, but I mean, I'm currently working on a polar bear. I mean, there's a head over there, but I'm currently working on a polar bear sculpture for the same reason. And I'm like, this is not a good congruence of interests here. Um, but then to discredit and try and deceive her daughter, who did not fall for it, according to the narrative, um, I that got my back up so much that everything I listened to, and it's a series of essays and snippets, and some of them are incredibly quick and glib, whereas others are more meaty. And it's like there were parts of it that I did start getting into, and like you know, I enjoy memoir because I like finding out about other people's lives and how they think and how they work through things and how they get from point A to point B. Yes, absolutely fine. Again, parts of it are turning more self-helpy and cult of personality ish and preachy, and you know that's a turnoff for me too in books. But so it's not that I've hated the entire thing, but it's like, oh, there's a lot of stuff that just gets my back up. And once we had those 1, 2, 3, and I think it was probably in like the first 5 essays, and they're not long. Yeah, it was all over. So I'm very likely going to go into Tuesday's book club by saying, yeah, I couldn't finish it. I just couldn't finish it. And that's okay. We're allowed to not like stuff. I mean, we don't have to like everything. Not, gosh, if we liked everything, if everybody liked everything for the same reasons, even, this world would be a very boring place. So I'm allowed to not like things. I am allowed to not like other people's creative expressions, even. And so are you. You may not like all the things that I do, but I appreciate you being here. I hope that I never pissed you off like that. Because I was getting really pissed off at this book. I had to stop and start give myself big breaks. And yeah. And like I said, I don't think I'm gonna finish it. I think I'm gonna just call that one done. Thank goodness I didn't purchase it. I borrowed the audiobook through Libby. And if you have a library card, I highly encourage you to check out the Libby app. This is not sponsored, because it is a great way to access the digital offerings from your local or even statewide in my case, because my local library is part of the larger statewide network. And so, I get access to whatever's available throughout the state. So ebooks and audiobooks. And I found some really great books and some really cool authors. And it has saved me money on being in so many book clubs because, if I can find it through there, yes, obviously I can borrow a book through the traditional library system, and even use interlibrary loan when something is available elsewhere that they can get. But it's very difficult for me to remember to read a physical book as opposed to I always have my phone with me, and so if I've got a digital book or an audiobook, I can get that done a lot easier. I can read it anywhere because I almost always have my phone with me. Um, so yeah, I do encourage the use of the Libby app. I'm glad that I was able to get this book through the Libby app. And maybe it would have been different if I were reading a physical copy and not hearing the author's voice harp at me on these things too. That might be an issue. It's like I've associated her voice now, unfortunately. I mean, it really is unfortunate. I have a feeling there's more good things in that book, but I don't know if I can wade through all the other infuriating stuff to get there. So yeah, again, I'm not gonna tell you. If you want to know, you can private message me. But I don't want to put this author on blast. And that's not what I'm here to do. I'm more talking about my reactions to a handful of things that came very quickly opening the book, and I'm just but it's like that. It's like that when but I think about that, and this is getting back to my own creativity. I think about that when I write my books. I know that there are things, I mean, you can't please everyone, and so there's just no sense in trying. But I try not to be oblivious to things. I try and think about the impact of the words and the words I choose to use, the scenarios I choose to employ, and even the background details. So in one of the books, I had them going out into on a hike, and they had to be careful of hunters and stuff because it was a sporting area, meaning game hunting. But I needed to know what season. It's like, well, what season would this be? Because I knew the time period, approximate dates that I have in mind as I write this book because it's written in real time, but 2 years back, more or less. Um, and so I looked up. It's like, what hunting season is it in this state in Louisiana at this time of year? Oh boy, that was a rabbit hole I didn't expect to have to trudge down because there are so many. I'm like, okay, what would somebody be hunting now? And the reason why it matters, could I have made something up, something plausible? Sure. But if someone who actually knows, either someone they know is a hunter or they themselves are engaged somehow in hunting. Either they run a hunting lodge, they do the hunting themselves, they run a processing shop, butcher shop, or what have you. They're going to know that's not. If I say it's duck season and it's 2 months off, or if I see it's turkey season, or if I say it's gator season, or whatever, it's going to pull them out of that narrative. And so instead of reading the book through and being in this world that, I've tried to construct, they're pulled out, and now they're like, well, this author doesn't do her homework. This author doesn't know what she's talking about. And suddenly they're irritated. Are they irritated enough to put my book down? Maybe. Are they irritated enough to say, don't read this author? She doesn't do her homework. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She will they lose faith in me? Maybe. Will they tell other people? Very possibly, because there's that whole adage about we tell two or three people when we have a good experience somewhere. We tell everyone when we have a bad experience. Just look at social media. Look at the people who put companies and people and places on blast because of um, a poor experience there. This is the way of the world. Social media just makes it even easier to do those things. It's human nature for the the population in general. Not everybody is like that. Some people prefer to talk about what they like instead of what they don't like, and that's great. But does it help other people? Because we think when we're telling somebody, "Yeah, I had a bad experience here," or "I had food poisoning at this restaurant," or "I really like this place, but this place is better," we think we're helping. Um, you know, but anyway, I'm going way off topic, and apparently I just feel chatty today, which is good because now I got to go do my Stardew Valley stream. So hopefully I haven't used all my words for the day here. But in the meantime, I hope you have a good week ahead. We are moving into the middle of June. Um, I don't know about you, but where the weather where I am has been pretty gorgeous this week, and so I am enjoying that. And I hope you get some time, make some time to do what you need to do to fill your creative well, whatever that is. And until next time, bye.